okay, my experience with Hurricane Ivan, when it was approaching, when it really became a hurricane, when it was really close to Barbados, I remember I was working at a camp. So, I didn't know anything. I went into town and I was, socializing and with my friends, and I was saying, like something like it's up. What's going on? There was no message or warning on my phone because that's where I receive my information. And sometimes, we wouldn't have data on our phone, and so there's nothing to warn us, no alarm, no anything that would give us a warning. And I was seeing, sometimes our parents would have to let us know, and we'll be looking at our phones and we were talking to each other and like, what, something's approaching. I would look, and then I would realize, okay, I understand what's going on. And then, people go to the supermarket, we buy different things like bread and everything is off the shelf. And by the time we get there, it's like, what do we have next? Things are closing, things are shutting down. A hurricane is approaching, but, it's really concerning for us because, even as far as money is concerned, it's the last minute and we might not have enough money. And that's a big challenge for us in the disabled community. First thing is to hear via radio and hearing people go and leave everything behind, and the disabled people are left behind because we don't hear it as yet.
There's a disconnect between disaster preparedness in general and the disabled community to a large extent. Within recent years, over the last 5-10 years, when we started to take hurricane shelters more seriously, the government started doing more to advertise which shelters were accessible to, and in fact, they set up the Vulnerable Persons Committee, which went out on an annual basis, monthly basis, whichever, I can't remember now. But they would go often and evaluate persons who they consider to be vulnerable. Not all were the persons with disabilities, but there might be the elderly gentleman living alone or the lady with these small children living whose house seemed unsafe. And it included persons with disabilities as well. The disaster emergency organizations also are part of that. And so they would go out and they'd evaluate nursing homes and so. Then they started a process where through the Barbados Council for the Disabled, they would pay us to have someone go and evaluate the shelters for their level of accessibility. So in that regard, and with those kinds of things, yes, there has been attempts over the years, and they're getting better, to improve things for persons with disabilities as it comes to disaster preparedness. Now, the deaf community, but there's still so many other aspects of it that are not really being properly addressed. People use the term disabilities as though we're one group of people. We're not a one size fit all. So each situation is going to be different for each person. You can't plan for, you can plan for most eventualities, yes. You can't deal with all, because someone who's autistic, for example, somebody who's intellectually challenged, we haven't touched on those, but how are you communicating to them effectively? We assume that everybody gets information the same way. It's about, last year, I remember so clearly, this isn't hurricane related, but just to give you an example. When the government introduced the alphabet system during COVID, I remember so well a reporter reading off, on such and such a day at such and such a time, it's this letter and that letter, and the other day it was that letter and the next and 34. So she was reading it like this. She says, Mondays between the hours of 9 to 12, if you're A through F, it is your turn. Blah, blah, and on she went. And it's your turn, and it's your time, and it's your this. When she got to the regulations that government did put in place for the disabled, for the disabled community, their days, which means all of a sudden we are one removed. You're not talking directly to us anymore.
Got
That
you.
says a lot.
Got you.
Language means a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which means we're already excluded. You're expecting that other people will communicate to us.
Right.
When my family comes to me, right? When certain things need to be done in this household, I deal with it, right? When they come out doing these surveys and these stuff like that, I'm the person that goes to the door and deals with those kinds of things. My aunt and my cousin, they're not the kind of, they don't like talking to strangers that much. I'm the person that calls up and reports the damaged poles and what's not.
Right.
I'm the one that deals with all of those issues. So if I'm the person dealing with those things, why are you talking to them?
Right.
I'm the only one that's fully employed. So if any extra cash has to come, it's me that has to deal with these things. But yet you're talking to them instead of talking to all of us, because you shouldn't be talking to me either, because what my decisions are will impact my family. So you need to talk to us as a whole, as a collective. So persons with disabilities, we get tired having to deal with that all the time. But yes, we continue to keep noise. But again, different responses for different people.
Right.
And you can't sit down and make a tailor-made solution.
I personally feel that the disabled should be engaged in every single area. And I mean having a seat at the table, not an afterthought. However, I must say, I remember in my years as the president of the Barbados Council for the Disabled, we had I can't remember which hurricane it was that year, a storm, sorry, that year, but this storm was approaching and the deaf, they have to speak about the deaf first. The deaf, they were up in arms because they had no clue as into what was going on in terms of the updates and stuff. Other than the news, you know, the time when we have Bonnie interpreting on the news. After that, that's it. That year, I remember that year specifically, when we were trying to figure out what do we do in terms of getting the information. I contacted Bonnie, and I contacted the Disaster Emergency Management DM first. And out of that, I must say there has been a perfect marriage in terms of including the deaf, who we always say they are the most marginalized group out of the whole disabled community. And out of that, we would have had, they were sending the updates directly to Bonnie. Bonnie was interpreting. And thank God for social media. We know it's good and it's bad. They were able to keep track from that year. And from then on, there has been a perfect marriage between that group and so they are always aware of what is happening to Barbados through that.
I'm usually on social media a lot. There's a Facebook group called Barbados Weather Watch with a lot of information about the weather systems that will be approaching, and also sometimes the news. Not much on the news, but I would stay tuned to that page. And as it approaches more, as it gets closer to Barbados, I would pay attention more. And deaf people really can't hear the radio. We can't hear the radio. So, a hearing person would listen to the radio first, and then a deaf person gets that information secondhand. We're the last people to get that kind of information. And that's really a big problem. We've seen a little bit more improvement, not a big or huge improvement, but we've seen more accessibility with technology.
A friend of mine lives in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. And a few months ago, we were having a chat and her phone started making funny noises. Mm-hmm. When she checked, it was an Amber Alert, I think, or I can't remember which alert, but it was because a child was a little 2-year-old was missing. And it was a text message that went out to everybody within that town, within that city, alerting them to this missing child. We need something like that. Now, there are apps you can download that you can opt into, but first you have to know the app exists in order to get it. There are about 2 apps, but neither of them were designed with access for screen readers in mind. There are some people who are pretty good with their computers and their cell phones and what's not, but you have to go seeking that information. Whereas my friend in Winnipeg, she just happened to be talking to me and her cell phone was next to her and it went off. Now, there is an app, CAP, Common Alert Protocol, it's called. And that app nearly gave me a heart attack one day because I heard sirens going off in my bedroom and I couldn't figure out what it was. That's because that's their way of alerting that something is happening that you need to know about. They have other signals too that aren't quite as traumatic, but that one lets you know, pay attention to me. But like I said, I had to have had it on my phone in the first place to know what it was for. So to me, if a system was set up where whether you opted in or not, whether you were part of it or not, the same way how the television is on, a message comes up on the screen, the radio is on, a message is broadcast over the radio, the same way how those things happen. We live in the age of the ICTs, and therefore I think we're not using them to their fullest potential for persons who may not otherwise have access to the information. The deaf, now again, back to the app, the CAP app, when I use that one, I can call a fox how to get through it because I know how to use my cell phone well enough to do that. But not every blind person, not everybody using a screen reader can fidget and with the thing to get it to read off the information the best way because it wasn't designed properly for screen reader access. But if you send out a text message, everybody can access that. There doesn't need to be anything fancy to do that.
So that BMS, that Barbados Meteorological Service or Weather Service, I have the app on my phone. I recently downloaded the app. I tested to see if it would work, and it worked good so far, but still not enough because, again, the issue will be data and not having the data. And, if I don't have that, that's a problem. That's the main issue. Connectivity. I believe in the US, my friend said there's a special program. The message is sent out so you can see it. So it doesn't matter if you have it. It doesn't matter the area you live. It doesn't matter. But here, I believe we should do more with technology, not just an app, but, okay, for example, for tsunami warnings, for earthquake warnings, for everything like that. That app, that will not show up on the phone, to my knowledge. If anything disastrous really happen, and sometimes you hear a special sound, an alarm that goes off in some countries, and people know what to do. They run to safety, and you see all people scampering, and so I will be like looking around like, what is going on? I don't know what to do. What's going on? What's happening? So it's things like that. We need to do more with technology to become more efficient.
Okay.
A more in-depth look at technology, not only for the deaf, but not only for the disabled, but hearing people as well, so that we will all be equal.
Council for the Disabled, we are an umbrella body for 17 fully affiliated organizations and six associate members. It got changed recently, so I was trying to remember which one it was. Mm-hmm. We sit on a number of bodies. We have representation in the context of this on the Vulnerable Persons Committee. And like I said before, through us, DEM has done work in terms of their shelters, in terms of speaking out to persons in the community about different things. We're part of various bodies and we continue to lobby. Can we do more? Yes, we can. There are a lot of areas that I wish we could cover, but we have a very limited staff. We have 4 admin staff and the board of directors, and the board are volunteers. So we don't get everything done that we should or that we could because we don't have enough resources. And that answers the second part of your question, limited resources. That's our biggest challenge. And when I say resources, I'm not just talking financial resources. I am talking about access to persons in a variety of different capacities and areas. That is the kind of thing I am talking about that we need to find, that we need to get access to. There is an organization out there who was established to offer support to nonprofit organizations to come in lines with good governance. Those kinds of entities need to be established in other areas as well, to really be able to support and aid us.
One disadvantage is the lack of policies. That is something that our government really need to bring forward. And it was during my presidency also that we were able to present a petition. Unfortunately, it had to go that route to the then Prime Minister. And then that would be PM Stewart. And we presented a petition for the disabled parking spaces. And to us, that is a right. That shouldn't be a big thing for us. We have a right to be out there like anybody else. So that is one bill that I ran with as the head of the organization. And we were able to, it was passed in the Barbados law, in 2017. So it is illegal to park in the disabled parking space without the requisite ID. So things like that, when you've worked so hard, there's a board, the council has a board, but when you've worked so hard to see these things come to pass, is a real great feeling at the end. However, there's still, like the coding, the building code. You build a building and decide about ramps. Ramps is not just something you just push on at the end, a piece of slab of concrete. There's certain things you need to know the particular, how many inches up, the gradient, all that is important. So I keep saying people do these things and think they're doing the disabled a favor. And that is one thing I kept saying throughout my presidency. It is not a favor. It is a right. When you put a ramp onto your building, not only a disabled person will use it. Don't say, oh, I don't got a disabled person coming at me. Your delivery guys who rode in a trolley with a whole set of bottles or whatever the case may be, they're really glad to see that ramp. A person might come with a heart condition. The person might not look disabled, but that person is unable to walk up steps. So these are little things that unless you're exposed to them, you don't even think of. So then we have that, then we still don't have, in terms of the disabled and having any, as I said before, any kind of law. There's none. So we have one single on our book. So those are things that I would love to see. So yes, I'm no longer in that seat, but I know at present I am the president of the Multiple Sclerosis Society, so I have a voice still. And I think as long as, my disability was acquired, so I was not born with one, but I have to keep fighting and trying to advocate for things that seem so, you might not think of it as an able-bodied person, but for me, it's important for me. And for so many other persons who might not be using, you don't have to be using a wheelchair, but it can be, and the disabled community is a large group, because even if you think about it, The worldwide statistics, it is like 5% of the world. So we have a voice. So it's for Barbados now to we have to make sure that our disabled are taken care of because they are part of us. They belong to us. We belong to the society. We belong to Barbados. So we are saying this is who we are. This is who we want to be. We want to be part of whatever is going on.
When a system is approaching, the authorities almost always call us because they'll ask us to register. So they always call to find out if we want to move to a shelter, if we are okay, and so on. So I think they're doing the right things. I think so, yeah. Up to when our Hurricane Elsa was approaching, I got many calls. And not only from the ministry, also from our DEO. Yeah. So they keep us in touch. They keep in touch with us, and they keep us informed. Yes. Well, I'm always concerned about hurricanes, always, because I know how devastating strong winds can be. I experienced a hurricane once in St. Lucia, 79, I think it was. That was Hurricane Allen. Yes, that was devastating. So, having experienced it before, I am always prepared. I always try to prepare myself for to take action. Yeah, to take action and to preserve life and limb and so on. So, but what I did was when I heard it, I checked everything, my searchlights, and get my documents in place. Listen to the radio and television. Make sure you're getting the right information. So those are the things I did. And then nighttime came, and I went in and prepared, shut all my shutters, shut them, and prepare myself for whatever would come.
Okay, so I saw on the news that Hurricane Elsa would be approaching. So I decided it's important that I do some preparation before I went to the shop and purchased some things. I made sure I had the necessary items. I would watch on Facebook or other social media and also share posts on Broad Street Media's page. I'm responsible for that page for sending out news and other important information or information about weather. And the deaf would ask questions and I would explain to them. Sometimes it's challenging though. And as the day went by, I saw the rain and the trees, but then the next day in the morning, the weather was even worse. Much stronger winds and winds as well, and it continued until later on some trees fell and roofs came off. It was an interesting experience. And then as it cleared up a little bit, I decided I'd take a little walk in the neighborhood. I saw some roofs off, I took a little picture. I saw another roof off, a tree down, different things. I saw water flowing by and I took lots of pictures.
I always want to know what a hurricane, I wanted to experience a hurricane. You know what it would feel like to be, to experience that. I know we only had Jeanette in 55, but now I was like, okay, wow, this is a hurricane. So I remember at that time when the hurricane was approaching, you know, the government sent out the information about being prepared. But I remember it was like early morning. My mother was calling me, trying to let me know, but I wasn't really paying attention. It was really early in the morning, and it was like, what's going on? Okay, all right, fine, whatever. So I got up, looked around. I was like, okay, went back to bed.
For me, it wasn't that bad. We were without power for majority of the day of Elsa, but I have a power charger for my cell phone. I charged up everything, so I have a Mac, I have a PC, so they were both working straight through. I have data on my phone, so if I needed to communicate, I was cool. So I didn't have any problem. That was me. But others weren't so fortunate, because there are others who live alone, who are terrified by storms. And there's nothing so scary as being by yourself during, something, especially you can't see the lightning, you can't see what's going on, you don't know what is safe and what is not. So that was my biggest concern during it, because I knew my house just after Surferi erupted, we had the roofing updated. So I knew that the house was secure. I knew we had enough to eat and what's not. So I didn't have an issue. But the other persons in the wider community that have disabilities, they were the ones that I was most concerned about. What was happening there? How were they managing?
I used to always push, make sure you have some sort of support. It might seem, somebody might say, oh Maria, you saying that, you married, you got your husband. No, make sure it has to be somebody in your community, your family. And this is one thing I always pushed among my members. Make sure you have at least one personal contact. You cannot leave your well-being to any officials of any party, any group. You've got to be able to say, okay, let us use the last hurricane. I was lucky that I was not out of water and electricity for a long time. I only had a day. Okay? That seemed like that was a short time compared to a lot of my friends. One of my friends was out for 9 days. She did not know what to do. But out of the frustration, the conversation came up again when she got back with her phone and stuff. Lucky for her, her mother is up in age, but they still had someone to call on. That is my point to my members. You've got to have somebody who can assist you in these times. So for instance, the Multiple Sclerosis Society, we did a project a couple years ago where we got some grant funding and some funding for it, and it was supplying water tanks, potable water tanks to all our members. Now we've got a new batch of members into the society, and right now I am trying to see how we can find at least 9 tanks for none of our members, because none of our members, whether they're using a chair, walking with an aid or not, they're not able to lift any water receptacles. So therefore, they need a water tank. Now, these people say, oh, if electricity goes off, we find a way to make sure somebody can have water in the house for them. So that's why we're saying you have a network. It might not be a large network, but at least someone, I kept saying at least one person who can check on you and make sure you're okay. So, okay, if you want, one of my members, he's unable to go out, and he had a cousin who was able to go outside, buy some batteries and bring bottled water for him. So he was still able to make sure he had his supplies. So that's what I'm talking about. Having at least, it has to be somebody, your neighbor. Thank God I can call on my neighbors for anything if I need. So you have to be able to have one person who can access you in no time in order to assist you until the official help comes.
Community is everything now. It's everything. Because when you get to a situation, a stage where you cannot do certain things, you need help. So I've been living here since 1987 on this spot here, and I've always been nice to my neighbors. So now they are very nice to me. I can't complain. I can't complain. They are very nice neighbors.
Depends. Okay, if it's just me, by myself, who would let me know anything that's going on 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours later, I'm just there clueless if it was me by myself. But if I was in the house by myself, I have a support system, fine, but it depends. I really depend on social media. You know, people on social media, we share information, and then sometimes family as well. And my mom as well, she will tell me, but I see the information on my phone for the most part. But again, it would depend.
When I have MD, muscular dystrophy, it is a neurological condition where normally when a brain tells your arm to move, it will move. But the connection between your brain and your limb, so to speak, let's call it a cord. Like a light switch, you turn a light switch, the light comes on. But there is a cord between the switch and the light. But if that cord is damaged, when you flick that switch, the light is not going to come on. But that's what happened with these neurological conditions. I can't move my hands as free. I want to move it, but it's lazy. You understand? So that is what MD really does. That part, it affects your limbs. My brain works fine. You know, it's pretty sharp still. You know, but it's just the limbs are lazy. You know, I was just around 30. Just around 30. I didn't even know something was bothering me. I didn't know. My friends would say to me, "You're limping." Yeah, are you okay? Something hurting you or something? And I would say, "No, nothing is hurting. I'm all right. I'm not limping." And they would say, "Yeah, you're limping." I didn't even know I was limping, but it was that slight, you see. So gradually, I realized I was limping in truth. Because when I had to tiptoe, I realized I couldn't do it properly. So I then started seeing the doctors and the specialists and so on until I found out what it was. I was working all along, driving, doing everything. And I retired from work at the end of 2005. It was getting difficult to do certain things, and so I decided, okay, I've had enough. I can't do it no more. So I retired and decided to stay home and enjoy my life as much as I can.
When I developed my disability in 2006, I never thought it was the end of the world, but I knew it was the end of a lot of things that I used to do before. At this stage, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it is a progressive condition, but I have not let it claim me. So I love life, and one mantra of mine is live each day like it's your last. I have a strong belief in God, and I always tell people that is what brought me through my diagnosis, the rough times. I've been married for 24 years, and my husband has been and still is a strong supporter. I did not always have a disability, and that changes the mindset because life changes, and it changes in a split second, or as we say, the twinkling of an eye. So my advice all the time is enjoy each moment of each day as if it's the last.
Hi, I'm Lionel. Smith is my last name. I'm deaf. I grew up in a hearing family. I'm the first boy from my mother's side. My father's side has a bigger family, but I went to the Irving Wilson School. I graduated at 18 years old. Then I started teaching sign language, but I put that on pause for a few years. Now it's COVID, so there are no classes set up. I'm working privately at a school, volunteering. It's not through the Ministry of Education, but it's a volunteer work that I'm doing. But with these numbers, these COVID cases that have been increasing, the situation has really gotten out of hand, even with the staff and everything like that. So I'm just trying to live as normal as I can as a deaf person, but that's basically who I am.
There's definitely a need for more professional interpreters, deaf interpreters. They can volunteer. For persons who are willing to volunteer to support the deaf community, that is important. At the deaf school, they need to teach the deaf about how to prepare for hurricanes, perhaps earthquakes, tsunami. If there is an ash fall, there needs to be education so that they know how to prepare and be ready for these situations so they can learn early. Perhaps if someone is confined to their home, maybe they have a television or a computer, they can make a video, edit, perhaps attach some photos. There are some deaf persons, like age 60 to 80, they may not understand formal sign language, only like the use of gestures. So you need to use more photos, more visuals to help them to understand the message. Or CBC, using PSA, public service announcements, to make brief ads so that the deaf can see and understand how they themselves can make preparations, something that really matches them as a deaf person. Or the family needs to communicate with the deaf individual. Use some signs that they will understand, warn them outside the weather is not so good, don't go out, so that the deaf person understands. Bring them along, get them to help with perhaps cleaning the area. If a hurricane is coming, it is important that the family cooperates with their deaf family member, regardless of age, whether it's a young person or an older deaf person. It is important that there's communication in the families.
I believe the slowness in taking action by the authorities. For example, we were making a lot of noise about disabled parking spots. Just one, not that. Anybody would park in a disabled parking spot. And you pull up to a business place and there is nowhere to park. And if you wait long enough, you will see someone just sprint into a vehicle and just drive away. And we were trying to get the law changed to find people who do that. If you put a fine, most of them won't do it. And it took us so long. We had to try and seek and beg. Eventually we started doing a petition and we got quite a lot of names. A lot of people signed up. So that helped. So what I find is this slowness in taking action when the underprivileged cry out. Yeah, that I would like a change. Move faster, so to speak, in helping the underprivileged, the vulnerable. Be a little quicker in helping.
I've always told my sign language students, hire deaf people, hire them. Deaf people need skills, they need that exposure, they need to connect. Deaf people need to be involved. When we learn to be more included, when we are included, when we see the deaf and the hearing working together, I think that's the number one thing to have inclusion, so that we will know, for example, maybe it's not always a right fit, but if you know, if you want to become more connected, you must have that trust where you have the deaf community or members of the disabled community working side by side.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I think if everyone knew that rule, believed that rule, and did as that rule said, a lot of the issues that we have towards the disabled and in the disabled community would not exist.
Learn about the vulnerable persons in your community, the persons with disabilities. Remember the ones in your home. Don't wait until something's approaching to find out what their needs are, or maybe during hurricanes. Talk to them, work with them, make sure that they are safe. But most importantly, interact with persons with disabilities. Build up the trust with them so that if you need to help them to evacuate, if you need to help them to get access to supplies, to food, to whatever, that they will trust you enough to know that you will have their best wishes at heart. I teach assistive technology, and I teach children and adults from overseas as well as from Barbados. And a lot of the issues that my people have here, they have there. What's the big difference? They have access to some resources. But even with access to resources, they still have a lot of the same issues, because people do not think of persons with disabilities as being completely the same, that we're not of equal value to others. And that has nothing to do with Barbados. That's just how people see us. Anything that is different makes us less. And that's how people generally see it. What we fail to remember is that all of us bleed the same color. All.